Hello girls, I hope you're staying safe at home. To continue with the respiratory system, today we are going to start with the parts of respiration. Okay, now in human beings as well as in other animals, there are four main parts of respiration. First is breathing. Now breathing, is when you take in air and give out air. Okay, this is a physical process where the atmospheric air is taken in and then it is forced out of the oxygen absorbing organs. What are the oxygen absorbing organs? They are the lungs. Next is gaseous transport. The oxygen which is absorbed by the blood in the lungs is carried by the red blood cells. Okay, red blood cells have a part which is known as hemoglobin, and oxygen will attach to it as a compound which is called oxyhemoglobin, and then it is carried throughout the body by means of arteries. Arteries are blood vessels which carry oxygen rich blood, and then the carbon dioxide from the tissues are transported back to the lungs by the blood by means of veins. That means veins are the blood vessel which carries carbon dioxide rich blood, so oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. So how does the blood carry deoxygenated blood? First is the carbon dioxide dissolves in the plasma of blood, that is the liquid part of blood, as bicarbonates. Okay, and then it goes to the lungs where it is given off, or it may be in combination with the hemoglobin of red blood cells. Okay, and then the unstable compound formed is known as carbaminohemoglobin. So once it reaches the lungs, carbon dioxide is released from the hemoglobin and it is given out. Now next is tissue respiration. This is when the exchange of gases takes place in between the blood and the tissue or the cells. The terminal blood vessels, terminal means the last part of the blood vessels, which are known as capillaries, very thin blood vessels. Okay, they give the oxygen to the body cells or the tissues, where oxygen diffuses through their thin walls of the arteries, the capillaries. Okay, and in the same way the capillaries pick up the carbon dioxide release. So that is the exchange. Tissue respiration is the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the cell and the blood in the capillaries. And finally you have cellular respiration. You know what cellular respiration is? It is the breaking down of glucose by oxygen, releasing energy. So it is the complex chemical change which occur inside the cell to release energy from glucose. Okay, so that is cellular respiration. Now moving on to the respiratory organs, that is the organ which helps in breathing, which helps in respiration. Okay, so in humans there are air passages, that is the passage through which air passes. It is made up of nose, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, and finally the air reaches the lungs. Okay, in a similar way it comes out from the lungs as well. So the nose is the external part, okay, with that you see, and it is made up of two nostrils, and the two nostrils are separated in the middle by a cartilaginous septum, and then inside the nostrils you have hair present. Okay, and what is the function of the hair? It does not allow large particles, dust particles, from entering the respiratory system. And now the two nostrils goes right up to the forehead and it opens into a pair of nasal chambers. There are two nasal chambers. The inner lining of the nasal chamber gives three functions. First is when we take in air, it is cooler air that goes inside our body, so it warms the air as it passes over. Next, it adds moisture to the air. The air that we take in is dry, so it must be moist. Okay, so it adds moisture to the air, and it also has a mucus secretion which flows down a lot when we catch a cold. Okay, so actually the function of the mucus, it is always there present in the nasal chamber. It traps harmful particles, especially harmful bacteria, viruses which enter our body. So it is said that you must always breathe through the nose and not through the mouth. You may get this in Explain Why. It is healthier to breathe through the nose and not through the mouth. And another function of the nose is to smell. The sensory cells of smell, that is the cells which gives us the sensation of smell, you will find it located in a special pocket. Small pockets are there, and it is situated high up in the nasal chamber only. Okay, it is right up inside the nasal chamber. So the smell must reach the nasal chamber. That is why when you want to smell something like maybe perfume, nice perfume, what do? You sniff. Okay, you give a sniff which carries the smell or the odor up into this pocket where you find the sensory cells of smell, and then you get the smell. Okay, so the first is the pharynx. Okay, the nasal after the nose, okay, goes up into the nasal chamber, and then the nasal chambers, they open at the back into a wide cavity. If you open your mouth wide, okay, right at the back, you will see the pharynx. Okay, so where do you find it? At the back of the mouth, and it is a common passage for air as well as food. That means food also passes through the pharynx, air also passes through the pharynx. Then the pharynx leads into an air tube which is known as the trachea. From the pharynx it goes into the trachea or the windpipe, and it also leads into a food tube, esophagus. If you remember, we already did that in the digestion chapter, digestive system. Okay, and the food tube is behind, it is located behind the trachea. Okay, so when not in use, the food tube is partially collapsed because it has soft walls. Okay, it is very soft, so it will collapse when the food tube is not being used. So the entrance to the trachea is guarded by a flap which is known as epiglottis. We did discuss how the epiglottis works in the digestive system chapter. And you know, this epiglottis, it closes at the time of swallowing food, and hence it closes the passage into the trachea so that the food will not go into the wrong path. That is, it should not go into the windpipe. So it is closed by the epiglottis, and food will pass only through the tube which is open, that is the esophagus. So sometimes when you are talking and eating, you choke, you cough. So that is what happens. There is incomplete closure of the epiglottis. When you swallow, it causes you to choke. So that is your pharynx, common opening for the air as well as food. Okay. Next we have the larynx. The larynx is also known as the voice box, and popularly it is known as Adam's apple, which is very prominent in the males. You can see it. Okay. Actually, it is a hollow cartilaginous structure. It is a structure made up of cartilage. Okay, and you will find it located at the start of the windpipe, just before the windpipe starts. Okay, you can place your two fingers right at the center of your throat and swallow. You will feel the larynx move up and down. The larynx is made up of two ligamentous folds. Okay, these folds are known as vocal cords, and when air is forced out through the vocal cords, it vibrates and then sound is produced. So when the distance between the two cords are adjusted and the tension also adjusted by the muscles which are attached to the vocal cords, then a different range of sounds can be produced. Now remember children, there is a difference between voice and speech. Voice is just a sound which is produced by the vocal cords of the larynx. But when we talk about speech, you know, it is made up of words and syllables, and it is speciality of only the human species. Okay, and then speech is given to the voice by movement of lips, cheeks, tongue and jaws. Okay, now next we come to the trachea. You can see the trachea, also known as the windpipe, comes from it emerges out from the larynx. Okay, and it goes down below in the neck, where it is partly covered by the thyroid gland. So you will find the thyroid gland here, okay, right at the beginning. And the walls of the trachea are strengthened. It is kept stretched forever by C-shape. There you can see this. They are C-shaped like this, because the trachea also made up of a soft tissue. Okay, it will remain collapsed otherwise. If it is not held in position by these C-shaped rings of cartilage, it will collapse like the food pipe. But Air must continuously pass through the trachea, so it must remain open all the time. So it is kept open all the time by the C-shaped rings of cartilage, and the incomplete part of C, it will remain behind, okay, on the back side. So the rings give flexibility and keeps the trachea open or distended permanently. Now next you can see the trachea, it comes down and it is breaking up into two parts, one leading to the left lung and the other one leading to the right lung. So they are known as bronchi. So we have a left bronchus and a right bronchus, okay. So when it enters the lung, each bronchus again divide into there, each bronchus like trees, okay, it is branching into fine secondary bronchi, there secondary bronchi, it is breaking up, and which still further divide into, still there you can see it, this one is also again dividing, okay, branching up into still finer tertiary bronchi. The cartilaginous rings which is present on the trachea are also present on the smaller bronchi, so that they are permanently open. Now bronchioles are still smaller tubes of the tertiary bronchi, which will have a diameter of just 1 millimeter, very small, and they do not have cartilage rings, okay. So there is continuous branching, as you can see, there is so much of branching here inside, you can see here, isn't it? So when there is repeated branching, the bronchioles ultimately end in a cluster of tiny air chambers. There you can see trachea, okay, bronchi continuously, okay, and then what will be formed? The alveoli, the tip, right at the tip, very small here, right at the tip, you will see a cluster of tiny air chambers which are known as air sacs or alveoli. Remember, alveoli or air sacs, okay. One is known as alveolus. So there is a network of blood capillaries, there you can see here, okay, which is surrounding the wall of each alveolus. The wall of the alveoli are very, very thin. It is one cell thick, only one cell, and it is moist, so that there is gaseous diffusion between them. That is, gaseous diffusion means carbon dioxide and oxygen, exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen takes place in the alveolus. Oxygen from the air first dissolves in a thin layer of water or fluid that covers the surface of the alveoli. So on the surface of the alveoli, there is a liquid. So first oxygen will dissolve in it, and then it goes into the blood capillaries which surrounds the alveolus. Okay. Now we move on to the protective lining of the respiratory passage. The entire inner lining of the larynx, trachea, bronchi and bronchioles is formed of ciliated epithelium. If you remember, we did this in the tissue chapter, okay. So during the lifetime, the cilia are always in motion, okay, they're always moving, so that if there is any fluid or mucus that is on them, or any particles that may have come in with the air towards the mouth, is removed. So there you can see, this is ciliated epithelium, which is always in motion, okay. So their mucus is there here, it traps the dust particles and bacteria, okay, and this cilia will constantly lash from side to side, so that mucus and any dust particles are there can be trapped and will not be allowed to get inside the alveoli. Next we come to the lungs, okay. It is a pair of spongy and elastic organs formed by the air sacs. They are connecting bronchioles and blood vessels. So we have two lungs, you know, the left lung and the right lung. They are roughly cone shaped, as you can see in this diagram. The two lungs, this is the lung, roughly triangular in shape, okay. And remember children, it is tapering at the bottom, this part, it is tapering. The left lung has two lobes and the right lung has three. Sometimes you will get this in explain why the left lung has two lobes and the right lung has three. And Why? Because the left lung is smaller, so that it can accommodate the heart in between. So this is your answer. Now, the lungs also have a covering which is made up of membrane. Okay, the inner is known as visceral pleura and the outer is known as parietal pleura. Children, these biological names are important. Okay, and in between there is a pleural cavity which contains a watery fluid which is known as the pleural fluid. And you know, the fluid is always present so that it lubricates. The lungs are in constant movement when we breathe in, breathe out. So it must be lubricated so that there is no friction and there is no wear and tear of the lungs. Okay, so it provides lubrication for free movement of the expanding and contracting lungs. The lungs are always expanding and contracting, expanding and contracting. So for that, the pleural fluid is found in the pleural cavity between the two membranes. Okay, the membranous covering of the lungs, so that it will keep it lubricated. The lungs occupy the greater part of the thoracic cavity because it is a big organ. Okay, and you will find it close to the inner surface of the thoracic wall, and their lower bases closely lie on the diaphragm. Diaphragm is, you know, the sheet which separates the abdomen with the chest cavity. Okay, now moving on to the blood supply to the lungs. The right auricle of the heart pumps the deoxygenated blood received from it, the different parts of the body, into the right ventricle. Okay, you will understand this better when you learn the circulatory system in the part 2 of this book. But remember, the heart is made up of 4 chambers, 2 auricles above chamber and 2 ventricles which is below. So the right auricle receives deoxygenated blood from all the body parts, and then it pumps the blood into the right ventricle which is below it. Okay, and this ventricle will pump it, take it to the lungs through the main pulmonary artery. Pulmonary means the lungs. If you suffer from pulmonary disease, that means you have a disease of the lungs. Okay, so remember, pulmonary in biology means lungs. So the pulmonary artery, after it emerges, it divides into 2 and it goes into the 2 lungs. The pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood from the right ventricle, okay, and it takes it to the lungs. So inside the lungs, you know, they divide and redivide several times to form capillaries, the smallest part of the blood vessels around the air sacs. So capillaries surround the air sacs, and veins arising from the capillaries join and rejoin to form 2 main pulmonary vein which goes back into the heart, okay, from each lung, and it pours oxygenated blood into the left auricle of the heart, the upper part of the heart, left auricle. So the right will have, right auricle has deoxygenated blood and left auricle will have oxygenated blood. We'll stop here for today. Your assignment is to draw this diagram in your practical sheets, okay? And in your copies, you will write down about the respiratory organs in brief in your own words, and as usual, submit it day after tomorrow. Till then, children, stay safe. God bless you.